So an algorithm could be utilized to decorate what a genuine graduate would be. What does that even mean? I overheard someone saying genuine graduate, and maybe they're referring to social workers being inferior. Something as fantastic as law enforcement. I was told that cop cars aren't made as sedans anymore. A sedan is a vehicle that's a classic one. It isn't an SUV or a truck. The gratification of the blanket statement. So an algorithm would be the underpinning of a graphic design because a graphic is computerized. In any case, I was on a street and I saw a cop lady, and then I was walking by and another cop guy pulled up in the same street, and they're both waiting in their car. So I go up, start up a chat with the cop guy, and lo and behold, that's how I found out the cop cars or sedans aren't made anymore. But what's more interesting is the cop lady. I think that in law enforcement, if I do say so myself, can be looked at differently with utilizing male and female, because there's always going to be cop females in the history of law enforcement. That my gripe was they were both sitting on the same street in their cop vehicles. I thought it was a waste of space. I should have asked, is it a known drug area? Because then that would have made sense. But instead of that, it was just like, I felt he was trying to be a protector of the cop female. I didn't say that, but algorithmically, if I would have videoed the whole thing, you would have saw like, yeah, there's actually that psychology behind that. And that's one thing an algorithm would be utilized as, is making nature more natural, even though it isn't. So I've been harsh, maybe a bit cruel today in speaking to myself, but I'm trying to be brutally honest. And there's something that an algorithm, it was made up before a computer by a guy in the Middle East, came up with algorithms. If you don't know what that is, it's okay. Most people don't. And surely enough, it is something that is mathematical, but is supposed to be like in the dynamic for define what it is the ultimate construct of an infrastructure, is to have eyes on either end. And so like when it comes to marriage, if someone is like seeing if they're dedicated enough, then they'll marry them, despite if they have permanent damage to their body. And the seriousness of fiber optics, I digress. And to be a model citizen, it's like almost a joke nowadays, because I'm taking everything serious. There's so many sides on the roads, my pet peeve, that they're like on the ground in the road and they're not even taking serious.
We just want to go like...
Is a crossover of two things that aren't the same but seem similar. It's just as lenses are what holograms default as, because when you look through it, you're going to see some sort of archetype of an underlying holographic principle. I take that back. DNA molecules don't strive to achieve what an algorithm is unless your free will allows it to. And that's the difference. But for things that are having a reptilian brain, like a pea brain or a bird brain or a blockhead or dumb as a box of rocks, would subside to the flesh material sense that they're unworthy of some free will, having the default position be what an algorithm rendered DNA would say evil can persist and surmount because it must. The things that define reality are in sound and material, things that are hard. Because sound can't be hard, but they can strike something with a whole bunch of energy and make it seem as though it were a speeding bullet. The difference of one to the either is, of course, how well an intermittent is interplayed. one threat could be an algorithm seeming as a fact checker. How closely related are they is almost as a data center to a biohazard lab. A biohazard lab aims to stop weapons of bio weapons. The fact that they leak and make everyone sick is an embarrassment to the government, allowing us to pay them to do so. A data center is something extravagant, as electricity is 10 times stronger in a fiber optic tube that's ran underground. If you told that to someone who had just found out a coil makes a light bulb turn on, what would they think? What would they think? Something as cool as a pill in an opioid epidemic is equivalent to the plant that had been made into the opioid pill. And so one to the other is a relation of concentrates. But how regular is a concentrate into the amount that it had been processed through? This is an intermittent, and it's something that an algorithm would strive to achieve, but clearly isn't, as a DNA structure is something that an algorithm would strive to achieve, but isn't. Not to mention a fun study that was documented on the news, I'll never forget for the rest of my life, because it's going to be a part of the rest of life. Bill Gates spliced mosquitoes that were modified from their genome and let them loose. They, of course, migrated past Florida. They got released in Florida. So that was documented on the news. What wasn't? The amount of tiny flies encumbering mating with mosquitoes, you can thank Bill Gates for however oddity that they might encumber. What meat on a stick like feels, it's this guy. And it's immensely troubling when DNA is fabricated for something that is a material when it's an accordance of a being. There's troubling because meat on a stick, when you're walking on a curb, there's roaring engines and loud wind. My grandma, if you saw my nose, was a bug. I'll get to that too in a minute. My grandma was a parking meter collector, and she would walk the curbs. She said she got a whole bunch of bad air because of the exhaust systems of vehicles kicking up constantly. And I'm nothing short of that, where I had inhaled some pretty bad exhaust up here in a corner I'm about to venture. And so that's not a joke. The winded in that per se is different than your ability for a vascular to upkeep. It's literal for a bad type of wind, which could get you winded twice as quick and twice as dangerous. Bugs. The one that landed on my nose is so troubling because it's within their genome to be birthed, which they just hatched everywhere. I noticed they weren't around last month, and in the last few days I've returned to Wisconsin from Utah, and I've noticed pretty quickly that there are a whole bunch of these tiny suckers flying around everywhere. They're looking at me really closely, and I can see that they're eyeing me up, and what's coded inside their brain is not to attack immediately because they're just born, so they're kind of staking out me. If someone is winded or their heart skips a beat, these are sayings, but it could be to an extreme where it's literal. And the more that you're unable to comprehend one or the other, you're up for grabs like meat on a stick. as if you were attuned to open it and make a difference.
A point of which what would be Zen